Many threads ago, shortly after the Great Wars had ended, Omneiris was ravaged by grief and fear. The losses had been great and many, and the lands were mourning all that had been. The soils were still filled with all the water that had fallen the past rows, and the earth was red. The world seemed to go still after moving for so long and so fast. Among the pain and stillness, a young witch looked up. She had been born on the loop the fairies were finally exiled. She had heard the stories of the wars, the fights, the death and destruction. And just as her magic awakened in her, she heard the earth, the ground, the trees, and they told her other stories. Of before the wars, of endless sunlight and soft rains and animals running and jumping and flying and swimming, of peace and harmony. And hearing all of this, the young witch dreamed. She dreamed of a place where such peace and balance could be once more. She told her family, her coven, but they were all too weighed down by their grief. None of them listened. And so she decided she would seek help and support elsewhere. She would travel the world and find people who shared the same dream and who would help her make it real. And so she left. With nothing but a small pack and her horned raven familiar, she started walking. She went through endless plains, struggling through blood-filled marshes, climbing the highest mountains, and sailing through the deepest seas. Until one loop, she stumbled through an animal folk village in a wide and lush forest. She had never seen the animal folks, distant cousins of humans and witches. And there, in the middle of the village, there was a young boy, with his light wings spread out, looking at the sky. The witch immediately knew she had found a kindred spirit and approached the boy. She told him, "I am a dreamer. I can hear the earth and trees, and they told me about the world before the wars. They told me about the beauty and the peacefulness of back then. I want to bring them back. Will you help me?" The boy thought for a stitch. His father had been killed just before he was born because the elves hadn't been able to help him. They had favored saving other elves rather than healing the birdman who had fought alongside them. So he said to the witch, "I will help you if you promise that this place will treat everybody the same. We shall all be equals." The witch smiled and answered, "Done." And so they set out to find others to help them. The boy would fly with the raven, covering more ground and finding good sleeping spots for food, looking for villages where they might find other dreamers. After many loops of travel, they found a small fae camp in the middle of the mountains, and on the highest peak, the bird boy saw a small fae carving stones while looking at the sky. The witch climbed the peak and sat next to the fae and told her, "We are dreamers. The earth and trees told me about how bright the world was before the pain and suffering of the wars. We want to create a place where everyone would be equal and where we could be at peace. Will you help us?" And the fae looked at the small carving in her hands. She had sculpted it with her magic, making it look like the dragons she always saw in the distance. She thought about all the creatures she wanted to see, wanted to ride or tame. And so she said, "I will, but only if there are plenty of animals." The witch smiled and answered, "Done." And they left the mountains and continued their travels. The fae was very good at wielding rocks and would build them shelters to rest in, protecting them from the outside dangers. They walked and walked and walked until they stopped by a lake to rest. But there, in between the rivulets, the fae saw gleaming eyes that looked at the sky. She exclaimed, and the nymph appeared, her body made of waves and her hair of waterfalls. She looked at them, young but knowing. The witch stepped forward and said, "We are dreamers. The earth and trees told me that there once was peace and serenity everywhere in the land. We want to create a place where we could live with animals and everybody would be equals and we would be at peace once more. Will you help us?" And the nymph remembered. She remembered how her mother had been Rain, how she had fallen on battlefields and had been cut through and discarded for her shape. And so she said, "I will, but only if everybody can learn to defend themselves." The witch smiled and answered, "Done." And they left the lake, the water in its bed disappearing as the nymph walked farther and farther away. But the little group no longer had to worry about finding drinkable water, for the nymph could provide it without limits. Their little group made their way to the edges of the world, and there, on a small island, the nymph saw a young elf who looked at the sky from the highest tree. The bird boy carried his comrades up so they could speak to the other dreamer. The witch sat down next to the young elf and said, "We are dreamers. The earth and trees told me about the golden loops before the wars. We want to create some place where we could learn to defend ourselves, we could live with animals, everybody would be equals, and we would be at peace once more. Will you join us?" The elf looked at her. He had lost his family not to the wars, but to red berries they had eaten that had poisoned them. The magic had not been strong enough to heal them. They only knew how to fight with it. And so he said, "I will, but only if we can learn to use our magic for more than fighting. Only if we can learn everything we want." The witch smiled and answered, "Done." The little group was up to 5. And the witch decided they should start building that place they talked so much about, for if they kept talking without doing, their dreams would never come true. And so they finally set out to find a place to transform into a dream. The elf guided them to wherever they wished to go, following the flows of air to find their directions. And that is how they found their way to a port city populated by humans. There, on a rotten part of the docks, there was a boy. He was holding a piece of fabric and drawing strange symbols on it with a finger dipped in some dark liquid. And between every string of symbols, he looked at the sky. None of the others had ever seen a human. They had heard they were weak and could not defend themselves. But the young boy was clearly a dreamer like them, and they were quite intrigued by what he was doing with his hands. So they stepped forward, and the human boy explained that it was writing, that the symbols were letters, and that everyone in the city could read what he was writing. It was a means of communication, of preservation. The stories written that loop would still exist threads later, through the generations and patterns. After hearing all of this, the witch approached him and said, "We are dreamers. The trees and earth told me there once was peace and beauty. We wanted to create some place where we could learn to use our magic in different ways. We could learn to defend ourselves. We could live with animals. Everybody would be equals, and we would be at peace once more. Will you join us?" The boy immediately leaped to his feet. His family had no food and had chased him from the house. He had nowhere else to go. So he said, "I will, if we write everything we learn down so we can share our knowledge with future generations." The witch smiled and answered, "Done." And then the elf asked the human if he knew of some place they could use to build this amazing place. And the boy pointed to the horizon, saying, "There is a forgotten island over there. It doesn't belong to anyone and nobody ever goes there. It's big and full of trees." The others immediately agreed to go check out the island. It was perfect in every way. And so they started building. The bird boy scoured the island to talk to the animals, calming them and making sure their needs were not disturbed. The fae welded the rocks in the cliffs to build walls and rooms for a castle. The nymph made sure there was an infinite source of drinkable water surging through a great fountain in the middle of the castle. The elf asked the wind to carry messages to the other continents, telling them of this new city they were building. A city of peace and knowledge, Eiropolis. The witch supervised everything, asking the earth and trees to welcome their work and protect it. As for the human, he wrote many books about the wars, the many species of Omneiris, and the construction of Eiropolis. Unfortunately, he died of illness before he could see the city in its full glory, but his books can still be found in the great library. Through the many rows of work, of building and talking and laughing and learning, the small group of dreamers came up with a song to sing while working, while learning, while being with others, a call to the magic to be there and to fully live the moment.
Give